All right. So thank you all for coming from all over the world in global time zones. And welcome to the UN Vienna side event during the United Nations Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice. Maybe everyone want to mute themselves. I'll mute everybody now. Okay. Uh, During the United Nations Commissions on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice. Our topic today is entitled Family and Non-Family Non-State Torture, Human Trafficking and Femicidal Risks, a Person-Victim-Centered Approach. Unfortunately, it will be in English only, that we don't have the ability for translation. And please turn off your camera and your microphone when the speakers are talking. We recommend that you set your view to side-by-side speakers so you'll be able to see the PowerPoints. And we will have a question and answer period at the end. So feel free to put your questions in the chat if you like, and I will put some resources in the chat at the end. I am Linda MacDonald, and with Jeanne Sarson, we have been for over 30 years supporting women healing from non-state torture. We call our campaign Persons Against Non-State Torture, and the two other speakers are Elizabeth Gordon, a woman who was healed from non-state torture, and Ingeborg Geyer, the chair of the Alliance of NGOs of Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice Working Group on Non-State Torture. Jeanne and I are both members of this working group as well. These speakers will give their own more detailed introduction. Jeanne and I, as members of the NGO of the National Council of Women in Canada, thank them for supporting the side event, as well as the other 15 NGO co-sponsors. And you can share your screen now, Jeanne. I just want to read out the other co-sponsors. There's the Alliance of NGOs of Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, United Nations Studies Association, Women's Graduates USA, National Alliance of Women's Organizations, International Council of Women, Federation of American Women Club Overseas, Zambia Alliance of Women, Democracy Development Center, Seroptimist International, Women's Platform for Action International, Good Shepherd International Justice and Peace, Association Against Femicide, International Alliance of Women Alliance International Defem, NGO CSW Geneva, and Graduate Women International. I'm just going to let in a few more people here. So I'm going to, as a member of the National Council of Women of Canada, I will share information about the council and its work. The National Council of Women of Canada was founded in 1893, and 5 years later, in 1898, Mary S. English, ex-recording secretary of the National Council of Women of Canada, wrote, "Strange that we do not remember that we are the keepers of our sisters' health and comfort and honor, inasmuch as we have the power to help them. Do we exercise it as we should? Not always," must be the reply. If one is not sure what one ought to work for, let eyes and ears be kept open. Something that needs attention will soon present itself. Her statement still fits us today. Because of the National Council of Women Canada, they've recognized that nationally non-state torture violations needed to be named as a reality 13 years ago, when in 2012, the National Council of Women of Canada supported the International Council of Women and passed this policy, urging the Government of Canada to develop legislation to amend the Criminal Code of Canada to make torture by non-state actors a specific criminal offense, and that provincial and territorial governments support such legislation that would criminalize torture by non-state actors. We are here to advocate for the global recognition of non-state torture as a human rights crime that is perpetrated against millions of women and girls. Non-state torture was acknowledged as a critical area of concern in the Beijing +30 UNECE Regional Review following the recent session of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action +30 session. Additionally, the National Council of Women of Canada has a 2024 policy advocating that femicide become a distinct article in the Criminal Code of Canada. An inquest jury in the province of Ontario of the killing of 3 women recommended that femicide be a separate offense in Canada's criminal code. Like non-state torture, femicide is an intentional act of violence. Both are brutal, destructive, and deadly, but are also preventable by addressing the root issues of all forms of discrimination and violence committed against women and girls. This is the knowledge shared today. And Jeanne, over to you. Are you there, Jeanne?
It's underneath here.
Go ahead, you can speak. You can speak.
What's that?
You can speak now.
Yeah, you're ready for your turn.
Linda, do you hear me?
Yes, Jeanne, I can hear you.
Okay. I have my son here because for some reason, even though we practice this, the PowerPoint is not coming up. So we're trying to correct the issue of why it's not showing.
It's showing for us, and it was moving.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's showing and it's moving, Chris. Just move it to the...
So do you see it now?
Yeah, we did see it all along. It's just that another camera kept blocking it out. That's what it was.
Oh, okay. Okay, folks, sorry. I'll just very quickly recap. The logos at the bottom were the ones that Linda was reading, and she was thanking everyone. So I'm sorry that I didn't have that up soon enough.
Well, we saw it. We saw it.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you couldn't see it because usually there's a green that goes around it. Okay.
I can see it, yeah.
Okay, and this is what Linda read about the National Council of Women. So it's my turn through all of this. Like I said, we practiced and we thought we would have this all down pat. So the definition of non-state torture really occurred for Linda and I, as she said, over 30 years ago. It occurred when a woman contacted Linda and I for support, who identified that she was raised in a family that tortured and trafficked her. So at that time in 1993, we were anti-violence workers, and also our work began as little girls because we were both born into family violence and both experienced sexualized violence, either as a 5-year-old child or as a young woman. So we knew nothing about torture. It was a whole new concept for us to understand that torture occurs in families. So we had to search for a definition, which was not there in 1993. So we began with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was part of our nursing practice and part of our education practice around the issue of equality. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 5, says no one shall be subjected to torture. So that was the foundation. So this is a definition that has evolved over the 32 years, that non-state torture is committed by non-state actors in private or public, in relationships perpetrated within families, in human trafficking, in prostitution, in pornographic exploitation, by violent groups and gangs, dismissed as social, cultural, traditional, or religious acts or norms, and can be committed during migration, displacement, and in humanitarian and civil unrest, for example. So what we did with this evolving definition, we broke it up into categories. And like I said, this started in 1993. And our definition progressed as our knowledge increased over time. So category 1, you see there, non-state torture, and the word classic comes after it. And that is because in 1993, when we went looking for a definition of what the acts of non-state torturers do, there was no definition. So our research ended up looking at acts of state torture. And what we found is that the non-state torturers and the state torturers commit the same, excuse me, or similar acts of torture. And there is the list. There's electric shocking, the physical tortures of being beaten, cut, or whipped, for example, immobilization, tortures when tied down. And you can see the water torture in a sink or a tub or a toilet because the perpetrators use the tools that they have on hand. Suffocation, choking, strangulation, the sexualized tortures, whether it's by individuals, groups, with weapons or objects. Then the polydrugging are forms of chemical torture. And you see deprivations here, nutrition, sleep, light and dark, heat and cold, the dehumanization, the humiliation, the degradation, and witnessing others or animals being harmed, and the powerlessness that comes. So what has evolved over these 32 years is that we learned that human traffickers, pornographers, pimps and buyers, and even employers can end up being non-state torturers. So that's because there's benefit to these perpetrators. We called it commercial-based non-state torture because of the benefits, either financially or in other ways. And I will go down to category 4 here, around groups and gangs and very violent networks. And this is often in the news. And here again, we hear the same acts as in category 1. The category 3, the social, cultural, traditional, or religious acts or norms that amount to non-state torture, these came from the work of UN special rapporteurs, and they identified issues of FGM, the female genital mutilation, acid burning, child marriage, and widow rituals. And for example, the reason we put it here, because we know, for example, in child marriage, that a child may be forced or efforts made to force her into prostitution, for example, and if she resists, she may be tortured. There are examples of this. So this is why we can say this is an all-around world global reality, that non-state torture is a global unacknowledged human rights violation and crime. So with this, I will turn it over to Elizabeth. So Elizabeth could share her story of just being Min.
Sorry, thank you, Jeanne. I'm Elizabeth Gordon. I live in London, UK. I'm an artist and art activist, and I survived non-state torture through my childhood. I first made connection with Jeanne and Linda almost 16 years ago in 2009, when I was struggling with torture flashbacks and survival responses, and I've been supported by them through my healing process. On their website, they'd named non-state torture as a specific form of violence against women and girls. So this opened the space for me to tell my story, to tell about the torture harms, and so begin to heal. Over the years, I've made many drawings telling the story of my childhood. So I'll share 4 of these drawings today that illustrate some of my healing process. First slide, Jeanne. Okay, so I drew this slide last year. It's a reflective drawing that shows how I felt shattered in pieces from being tortured when I was a child and a teenager. I couldn't feel my body boundaries, no me with outlines. I felt I didn't exist. I felt invisible. The perpetrators almost destroyed my sense of being a person, but they could not destroy my spirit. Over and over again, I had to stand in front of them. I was frozen to the spot, unable to move, with no clothes on. I was terrified. I felt humiliated, ashamed, angry, and defiant. I knew the perpetrators were wrong. I had dissociated to survive. I've drawn the rapes to my body and the shapes of the perpetrators haunting me. I've drawn a tear leaking from my eye, but I didn't cry. One way I tried to fight back was not to show the perpetrators I was hurting, because they got pleasure from that. So I realized that I never lost my determination, my anger, or my defiance, and I never lost my spirit of truth. I often lost hope, but I also dreamt of escaping and tried a few times. When I got free at 20, it was years before I saw non-state torture named, so I could begin to tell and heal. Next slide, Jeanne, thanks. So I drew this in 2010. It shows the healing work I had to do, and it shows how I'd survived by dissociating and compartmentalizing the torture ordeals. At that time, I was overwhelmed with unspoken about and unprocessed torture flashback memories that were hanging over me in heavy, dark storm clouds, and I could barely function in my everyday life. I've used wax crayons that children use. This is how I was telling about torture that had been inflicted when I was a very young child. I've drawn myself as a little blue and black stick figure, almost the same size as the curled up child stick figures in the boxes. Black, because I felt at that time covered with the evilness of the perpetrators. Blue to me means the sea, freedom, and healing. I wanted to heal, but I didn't believe it was possible then. I was existing on sheer determination to go through the dark storm clouds to know what had happened to me. The little stick figure in the box, that's red, green, and yellow, was a memory that was ready to emerge. I saw my torture flashback memories in black and grey tones, so I drew them with black pens and crayons, sometimes with red to show about the blood, and with the yellow and green in this drawing, I was telling about the pain. Next slide, thanks, Jeanne. So in this more recent drawing, I'm much further along in my healing process. I see myself as a whole adult woman. I feel in my body, and I've got body edges. I'm wearing clothes and shoes, and I'm taking up space. I'm not under heavy, dark storm clouds. I still have some torture ordeal memories in black boxes, but there are fewer of them, and I'm not overwhelmed by them, and I'm bigger than the boxes. The empty box will disappear as the torture memory it revealed is worked through. And each time I work through a memory, I'd feel lighter, a little more healed, and a little more free. So at this point, I know much more of my story. I'm able to grieve the reality of parts of it at a time. And I'm feeling an increasing and overall sense of well-being. Next slide, Jeanne. So this drawing is the two drawings I placed next to each other, Shattered and me in my puffer coat. So I created a new drawing I've called Moving Forwards. When I was a child, I was tortured outside at night without clothes. And as a younger adult, I didn't feel the cold, would often go outside in the cold weather without a coat. Little by little, as I healed, I came back into my body, making deeper connections with myself, that I was a girl, now a woman, and a person with human rights, not to be tortured, and that I deserved to wear a coat to keep me warm. Women can heal with torture, victimization, traumatization, informed care that's respectful to our human rights and is feminist, relational, and listening. I don't have black boxes now. I have memories of my childhood. I know as much of my story as I will, and I tell it. And with healing has come the freedom just to be me. Back to Jeanne now.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I have a few more slides to explain the research, the grassroots science that Linda and I developed. So to prevent women from being dismissed, we gathered information from them that they shared willingly that utilized a person and victim-centered language. And what you have there is the questionnaire that we developed using their language. And on it, there are 48 common acts of non-state torturers that women tell us they suffered. And number 49 is a place for comments, and when women will add additional comments that are not on this list. And really the questionnaire is a breakdown of the category 1 that I previously shared. And what we have found over time is that it helps women develop the language to explain the non-state torture acts perpetrated against them, the severity of it. And if they want a victim impact statement, it clarifies that for them also. And it names the crime that was perpetrated, the human right violation that was perpetrated against them, which helps healing because it explains to them what was done to them. It gets rid of chaos and confusion. And also it limits their ability to be aware of the risk of the harm if they continue to be in contact with any perpetrator. So this is an example how a woman who now lives in Portugal explained the multi-forms of non-state torture that she survived in different continents. And there are 3 examples of how she used the questionnaire. The first in red by family and other members, and the red X marks represent the types of non-state torture, forms of non-state torture that she endured. And I've taken the classic, like the electric shocking and the water torture, and treated as non-human or the dehumanization, and she suffered 36 out of the 48. And victimized in prostitution, the black, she says she was not electric shocked, but she was water tortured and dehumanized and suffered 24 out of the 48 forms of NST. And the purple is her ordeals of human trafficking, which included electric shocking, water torture, and treated as non-human. And she identified 34 out of the 48 forms. So it provides a situational analysis, that grassroots science. And just to share a person-centered, victim-centered approach of understanding the harms that can occur because of non-state torture victimizations. And these are the risks for consequential and conditioned suicide, femicide. That's the issue of understanding the root of non-state torture. And there's 2 drawings. There's by Alex. She shared this with us in 2000 around life or death. And what she shows there is a knife which she used for self-cutting, trying to stabilize herself, and the drugging, the pills, and that struggle every day of whether to commit suicide to end her suffering or not. And respectfully, Elizabeth also shared her drawing of suicidal programming. And what this means is the conditioned suicide femicide is that as a little girl, the perpetrators told her she should never, never tell. And if she did, that she should die or kill herself. And what the little drawing here is of her being forced to hold a knife to herself. And this is not the first time that Linda and I learned about a conditioned suicide femicide as a tactic of non-state torturers. We learned this in 1993 with the first woman that came to us. So these are examples of consequential and conditioned suicide femicide, which goes invisibilized if we don't understand the crime of non-state torture. So healing is about relationships. As Elizabeth said, we developed our relationship with each other a number of years ago. And it shows that femicide is preventable if we address the root issue. And for us, it's addressing the issue and recognizing non-state torture. And naming non-state torture helps make it preventable, because then we know it exists and we can start doing something to prevent it. So healing is possible, as Elizabeth just shared, and it is hard work, but it's possible, and that's a big, big plus. So for Linda and I, we developed 3 stages. Naming non-state torture as a human right violation. That was the Article 5 of the Universal Declaration, understanding the crime that a person is being victimized. And number 2 is describing non-state torture victimizations. And that's our questionnaire that makes it very clear and shows how global it is, because we've heard from women from many, many countries who have used the questionnaire, shared in our research. And the healing, the traumatization survival responses, as Elizabeth has shared. The victimization is the crime or the action that is perpetrated against a person, and the survival responses is how they survived, as Elizabeth shattered. So it's a non-pathology and a massive educational process. So I will now share with Ingeborg. Ingeborg, this is your first slide.
Yeah, sorry I could not open my micro in a very minute. Distinguished guests and colleagues, good morning, good afternoon from Vienna United Nations Center. I had to move around to find a quiet place as the last session of CCPCJ is still going on. Thank you for inviting me to introduce the activities of the Working Group on Gender-Based Violence as torture inflicted by non-state actors. A very complicated name, but it was coming from Linda and Jeanne. They too were the initiators of this working group, and I am only the coordinator of this group. I'm, as already said, Ingeborg Geyer from Sonta International, a more than 100 years old women's organization working for a better life of women and girls worldwide. And now I would like to summarize the activities. The working group was established in 2021 with the main objective to sensitize the international community on the urgent need to pay attention to the expanding issue of gender-based violence and all forms of sexual harassment and exploitation, including those resulting from cultural prejudice and international trafficking as a form of torture. The linkage between gender-based violence and torture has been highlighted by many experts. There is a need for approaches that can take significant steps in closing accountability gaps and providing for opportunities to identify and protect victims. The working group has carried out extensive studies and organized several webinars and side events over the years in Vienna, New York, and recently in Geneva. With the support of Honduras and Finland, we organized the first side event on the occasion of the 31st CCPCJ in May 22, an art exhibition in the Rotunda of the Vienna International Center in November 22. By the way, I copied the invitation to this exhibition into my first slide. The artwork of Elizabeth was the eye-catcher of the event. We also delivered several statements summarizing facts and issues during CCPCJ sessions over the years, and recently at the Beijing +30 UNECE Regional Forum in Geneva. A collection of background material of the working group, as well as the videos of the side events, exhibitions, and statements are on the website. The first step was to collect and analyze all international and regionally legally binding instruments. A total of 33 documents. The next step was to start research on domestic law provisions, especially from Latin American countries, as we had sponsorship from side events and exhibitions by Honduras. The number of states analyzed in total up to now is 35, 18 from South America, 8 from Africa, and globally 9. The work is accompanied by an analysis, the so-called working paper, which explores the critical issue of non-state torture with a focus on women and girls. It analyzes the legal frameworks you see on the left side of the slide, and in the middle you see this working paper. It emphasizes a paradigm shift to address the complexities of torture definitions, as it is not so easy, as Jeanne told us at the very beginning. The comparative overview of anti-torture laws reveals diverse approaches advocating for a victim-centric, inclusive definition. On the next slide, a group of international experts reviewed our paper and suggested in a workshop in 2024 to supplement the legal analysis by a companion paper which reflects a victim-centered approach written by Jeanne Sarson. In conclusion, this analysis and companion paper stands as a clarion call for action. It urges member states, policymakers, civil society, human rights advocates, and international bodies to draw inspiration from the varied approaches presented within the text. A mosaic of legal frameworks that have evolved to confront the stark reality of non-state torture. It beckons them to amplify their efforts, recognizing the imperative to reshape their legal frameworks. This paper envisions a future where the protection of human dignity is not just reactive but anticipatory, a future where the elimination of non-state torture and torture altogether is not a distant aspiration, but a tangible reality. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. You don't need, yeah, you can just stop sharing your screen now, Jeanne.
Yeah.
So in summary, it's nice to see everybody's cameras again. In summary, I want to go back to thinking of Mary S. English, the founding member of the National Council of Women. And she said what she did in 1898, 127 years ago, that we as keepers of our sisters' health, and if we are keepers of our sisters' health, and if they are invisible, we have to be open to opening our eyes and our ears. So hopefully this side event helped you today, if you'd never heard of non-state torture, to understand the crime and the human rights violation, and that you will see and believe the women and girls being non-state tortured. Jeanne gave the definition of non-state torture and described the crimes using the 4 categories that we developed. And Elizabeth shared 4 magnificent drawings of her healing and how she progressed from feeling like shattered pieces, opening each box of memory, until today she doesn't get triggered very often at all and has no boxes. And how amazing is that? And the positive message she brings is that non-state torturers do not destroy and did not destroy her sense of self, and that healing is possible. And then following, Jeanne presented our research questionnaire and our person victim-centered approach to healing in the three stages of it. And also making connection with non-state torture and femicide, because femicide is really only a breath away from non-state torture. And then Inge, as a chair of the amazing working group of the Alliance of NGOs of Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, the working group on non-state torture. She really itemized all the complex work that we've been doing as a working group to bring about information about legislation globally, and the companion paper to show that it's really important that it's a person victim-centered approach. So we want you to go away today feeling positive, because even though it's a horrible crime, Jeanne and I and everyone here that work with Jeanne and I are very positive about what's possible. Some of the successes that we've had is the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls. Reem Al-Assam, she included non-state torture in her report on prostitution, recognizing that women in prostitution do indeed endure and are subjected to non-state torture, and also that the UN ECE Beijing Plus 30 report included non-state torture in their report this year. So the message is that activism works. We're living proof of that healing is possible from non-state torture, and that we're hoping that you will embrace this work and try to find ways to integrate it into your important work as you move forward. So feel free now to ask any questions or put them in the chat, and we'll hopefully be able to answer them. And thank you very much. Any questions at all? Sometimes we find that there's not many questions because, oh, there's a question. Okay, Angela.
Hi, good morning. Thank you everyone for presenting. It's just valuable information. Thank you. I wanted to ask a question on one of Jeanne's last slide was talking about addressing root causes. And I'm speaking specifically regarding the Category 1 framework of the torture victimizations as it relates to family and that sort of thing. I'm sorry, I'm not up to date on what some of those root causes may be, but are you seeing a pattern of what those root causes are in that particular Category 1?
I guess I was referring to the root cause of knowing that non-state torture occurs and understanding the actions of the perpetrators, because the actions of the perpetrators means that the person they're torturing has to develop ways, their mind and their body develops ways to survive. And that's the very amazing process for Linda and I. To watch how and to understand how a woman's body and their mind helps them survive, because we have to understand how they present to us might be new to us. We might misunderstand that. So the root cause is also understanding the MO of the perpetrators, and then understanding also how the women survive the MO of the perpetrators. That's what I was referring to as root causes, is to understand both, because I know for Linda and I, when we started, there was no support for us. Because no one had even defined what the actions of non-state torturers would be. And as we went on in helping the first woman, we understood that we had to understand the MO of the perpetrators in order to understand her responses and to know how to deal with them. So that's like the root causes. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Makes sense? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Jeanne. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela, for the question.
Now I see, Allison, you have a question. What is the benefit of calling things that are already crimes like battery, domestic violence, or rape non-state torture? That's a good question. We're not suggesting that all forms of violence against women are non-state torture, and certainly not all of rape is non-state torture, or not all of battery, or not all of domestic violence. What we're saying is that there's certain acts of violence against women that would be considered domestic or rape or battery, that they would be torture if they include all the elements that Jeanne listed in the different types, like the distinguishing factors of strangulation or electric shocking or repetitive rape. If, one woman, for example, by the age of 24, she'd endured 20,000 rapes that we estimated in her short life. So one rape would not compare to 20,000 rapes. And we distinguish state from non-state torture, which is very important because state torture is about the military, the police, mostly torture that happens to men and men in war. So if we only called it torture, people would not go to understanding that we're talking about women, because torture is a patriarchal word. It's a word that's identified with men, women and girls primarily, that's who's come to us. They would be excluded because we wouldn't think of women and girls if you hear the word torture. We always defer back mentally in our minds to, I say we as human beings, defer back to men. So by calling it non-state torture, we're saying it's not perpetrated by the state. It's perpetrated by non-state actors. Then people have to ask, well, who are non-state actors? And that's when we get into the discussion. They're the everyday person, like a father, an uncle, a neighbor, a human trafficker, a man who buys a woman in prostitution, or a pimp. And so it starts to clarify, okay, these are crimes that happen to women and girls in hotels, in homes, in huts. It's not military, it's not prisoners of war. So that distinction really helps to teach and to differentiate the crime. And it'll evolve over time because we've added different forms of different categories, like for instance, not categories, but different groups. Like for instance, the Hague Mothers now is a new group that have come to us. They're women that are being discriminated by the Hague Convention in being alienated from their children. And some of the women have described acts of non-state torture that they've been subjected to. So as we evolve as humankind and talk about non-state torture more, there's millions of women and girls all over the world that are being non-state tortured, and they're still mostly invisible or being misnamed as assault. It's a different crime altogether. It has a different MO, just like femicide has a different MO than harassment does. So each crime carries its own MO of perpetrators, and they need to be distinguished for those reasons. I see here another question. We have a difficult challenge to bring perpetrators to justice since they are usually powerful people in the community. How do you work to expose them? Do you want to take that one, Jeanne?
First, I'd like just to go back and add a little bit to what Linda just explained, just to let you know that this has been a journey for us too, so I'm appreciating the questions. What I would add to what Linda said is when we studied state torture, we learned that the goal of the torture is to destroy the humanity of the person, or the personality of the person that they're torturing. And this is what we have found out also over time. Women tell us repeatedly that they were treated as non-human. And how they voice this is that women have told us that they don't understand that they had their perception of physicality. They didn't know they had skin, and like Elizabeth shattered, not understanding that she was a whole person. And you saw in Elizabeth's drawing the all the memory boxes that she had over her head. She was a stick person, and she shared with you so respectfully that all the next stage she had a physical being as she shared. So that's the dehumanization. That idea that torture's aim is to destroy the humanity, their personality, their sense of being a human being. And women have told us repeatedly that they thought of themselves as an it, as an object, as a nothing. Those are the terms that they used. So the issue, I had that on my mind. I wanted to share that. So I forgot the question now.
I want to go back to Allison's question, and then we'll do that question.
Okay.
Okay, Allison, I hear what you say there about you do think of women in torture, and that's true. We do think of women in torture maybe historically back in the burning times, in the what was that famous document? And of course in Salem, because Jeanne and I have actually been to Salem, where the witch trials were in Salem, the U.S. But that's still mostly, that would be considered state torture, because they were state officials, religious organizations, governments who were torturing the women. So it's still not non-state torture, and that's the differentiation again. And most people think that women aren't being tortured present day. They think it's ancient time, not present day. So we're talking about this as an ever-present reality. As we sit here today, we know that even infants are being tortured as we're talking, and that's who we're thinking about, the infants as well. So Jeanne, the question was, how difficult is it with the perpetrators being powerful people? And also, do we have case studies? And I put some resources in the chat as well.
If the question around case studies of powerful people, absolutely. But because the non-state torture is not recognized in most countries as a crime, women have no access to justice, actually, because you have to have a country identify a crime in order to be heard. We've had experiences where a mother whose son was tortured, in her victim impact statement, she wanted to use the term torture by private individual, non-state torture, and her victim impact statement was redacted. Any mention of torture was redacted from her victim impact statement. And her son wanted to use the term also that he was tortured, and that was not permitted either. So the case studies, this is what we're finding, that without a legal definition, women are asked to name the crime as an assault. And this is what the mother and her son had to do. They had to be content, if you will. And I use that word content because they're not content. They're still knowing that they were not heard. They did not have access to truth-telling, to name the crime that he survived and what the consequences are in their lives. So women have told us, yes, that the perpetrators are very powerful. It has included very powerful politicians. It has included in different countries men with financial status. And it's across, every profession you could think of, doctors, lawyers, social workers, nurses. Clergy. I don't think fishermen, fisher people. And also Linda and I made the decision in 1993 when we wrote and then in 2021 when we printed our first book, published their first book, that we would identify that women are also engaged in non-state torture victimization. And often the knowledge was that it was women were forced by men they were in relationship with to participate. But that occurred. But we also found out that a women's group individually, without men being involved, were also capable of inflicting non-state torture. Predominantly, the perpetrators have been
Janet, you are in mute.
Jeanne, you've muted yourself.
You couldn't hear what I was saying?
Now
Just for a
it's
minute.
okay.
Just the last few seconds. We have 5 minutes left now, Jeanne. We have a few questions.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, I'm finished. I was just ending for Reba that we have to respect the stories of the women we hear, and when they tell us women are the perpetrators, we have to share that also.
Yeah. I'm trying, there's somebody that's trying to speak, but I have they're muted, so I don't know why that is. But anyways, they need to unmute themselves. When we listen to women telling us they've been tortured, hearing and acknowledging they are telling about torture is healing and affirming. That's what Elizabeth just wrote in the chat. And there have been cases, there are laws against non-state torture around the world, in a few states in the United States and different countries, but it is very rare that the crime of torture is used in, even if there is the crime. For instance, in France right now, there's a case of 50 women that have come forward that are claiming that they were tortured in pornography, and there is torture in the French penal code, but the judge has removed torture as a classification in this case, and the women are very upset and they're asking for it to be put back into the case. So, as women, we have to fight to be recognized as being survivors of torture. Not so much with state now. We understand that women are tortured in conflict. And I know that I'm seeing here where FGM is another category, and yes, it is, because Jeanne and I have included it as a form of non-state torture in our categories. And the UN does recognize it as a form of torture and non-state torture, or torture by non-state actors. But when we talk to people, and we've been talking for 30 years now, it's so rare that people really think that women are tortured present day, non-state tortured. So that's why we keep talking.
And I think we're forgetting that it starts with babies. A lot of the education that we listen to, babies and small children are forgotten. Yet the evidence, we have video evidence in Canada and in the UK. Those groups that are watching online victimization, they tell us that babies are being subjected to sexualized torture, physical torture. So we have the evidence. It's just to promote a global awareness to do something about addressing such a violation.
Yeah, and Jeanette Westbrook is saying that her case, when she brought it forward, there wasn't a crime for non-state torture at the time, and that's true. So many women don't have that option in court. And that's so, if people ask us what they can do, you can lobby for criminal changes in your country, in your state. You can educate about non-state torture. Our website is there, and our papers from the working group. You can contact us and ask us for resources, or if you can't find any that you want to use, or we could even do some education. We have a book that's in the library in the UN, and they're both in Geneva and in Vienna. It's called Women Unsilenced. You can ask for it to be in your library and promote the education in your community. You can believe the women if you meet a woman who tells you that she's been tortured, to believe her and to ask if you could share her story. There's many things you can do. And we have another minute. Is there any other questions? I can see thank yous and appreciate that. And we are recording this, so we'll share it later. It's going to be up on our YouTube site, Persons Against Non-State Torture. We have a YouTube page, so it will be on there as well. Elizabeth, did you want to say anything else?
And there was someone who said this was called iPhone who wanted to.
I know, I saw that, but she can't seem to unmute herself.
Yeah, just didn't want to leave her behind or him behind.
Did you want to say anything about yourself before you finish?
Oh, just thank you for this opportunity. It's very moving to be able to speak and share my story and that perhaps of lots of other women too around the world. And let's hope we get visibility and name this as a crime so we can talk about it and heal.
Yeah, thank you from my side as well. It was a pleasure for me to be and an honor for me to be with you on this panel. And thank you for all the positive feedback we got from this. And please use our websites with all the materials. Yeah, thank you very much.
And Ingeborg, you do important work too. You said you only were, but you do a lot of work and we appreciate it too. And also, Elizabeth, our relationship has been ongoing.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm not a legal person.
Yeah.
So
it's about the caring. We all care.
Yeah.
That's very important.
Yeah.
Caring is the biggest solution to all of this. So find some way to care about women and girls and little babies who have been non-state tortured or are being tortured, non-state tortured today. So we thank you all. It's perfect timing. We'll leave now and just watch for our Persons Against Non-State Torture YouTube. We'll have the link up as soon as possible and you can share it with others. So I'll end the meeting now and thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Linda and Jean.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, everyone,
and
for
Inga.
coming.
Thank you.